Hello, everybody. Welcome to the HR Roundtable, the power of human connection. We're very excited today to have Vern Schellinger with us, who is the president and CEO of Context Count. He is an accomplished human resources and learning and development professional. He's held senior level positions both as a SVP of HR and as a Chief Learning Officer. He's worked with organizations as diverse as Dunkin' Donuts, the American Chemistry Council, the American Bankers Association, and Lee Hecht Harrison. He became a certified trainer for Context Count in 2006, and in 2021 bought the company. Vern has helped numerous individuals, from undergrads to CEOs, improve their ability to build the relationships needed to improve their performance and achieve their professional goals. Vern holds a master's degree in leadership and organizational change from George Washington University. We're very happy that he's been able to join us again for part two of our networking session with the Roundtable. Vern, let me turn it over to you.
All right, thanks so much, Patricia. And welcome back to those of you that were on the July 21st session, and welcome to you who are joining me for the first time today. Context Count is a company dedicated to helping you and others unleash the power of human connection. And I'm sure at different points in your life, you've experienced the power of human connection. And I think we can always all agree that we could always use more of it. The way in which Context Count helps people like yourselves and others experience the power of human connections is through our approach to teaching people how to network. Our approach is based on 8 specific competencies that have skills, behaviors, tools, strategies that anyone can learn. And in learning those and approaching networking in a new and different way, people can get more comfortable and more confident with networking. So today we'll dive in and we'll go over some of what Context Count has to offer. We've only got an hour. In the first session, we talked about the first 2 competencies. The first competency being adopt a positive network or identity, and the second competency being communicate your expertise. Wondering if there's any volunteers from the participants in that first session who would want to share one quick insight or one quick thing that you learned in that first session. Tricia, let me know if anybody raises their hands. Or we'll have a bunch of shy people today.
Yeah, it looks like we're a little bit quieter today.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll move on then.
Okay, I can hop in.
Thanks,
I was
Tim.
just gonna say, Vern, you were really helpful in kind of teaching us how we can, in a quick 30 seconds, say who we are and what we do, and really allow the conversation to hopefully flow naturally from there, by giving people enough context about ourselves to ask additional follow-up questions.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Anthony. And we're gonna touch base on that in just a minute, because I do want to spend a little bit of time at least reviewing the first 2 competencies for the folks who weren't here on the 21st. And for those of you that were here on the 21st, if you know anything about learning and development, repetition is a good thing. Repetition is part of how we learn anything. So with that said, I'd like to run a quick poll to get a sense of where you are in terms of how you think and feel about networking. And Patricia's pulled it up here. Here are the 4 statements. Choose the one that you most identify with. The statement that in your mind describes how you think and feel about networking.
Okay, I'm going to close the poll in just another second or 2. Okay, sharing the results.
Okay. So these results are pretty similar to the results from July 21st. This This is somewhat surprising to me that as HR professionals, the scores, I thought the scores might be higher. We deal in relationships, we deal in building relationships. But this also reinforces what Context Count has known for a long time. As we developed the 8 competencies, we developed a networking competency assessment, which is a much more in-depth assessment than this one question. And the results of that assessment over the last 10 years have basically shown the same thing that you're showing in this slide right here, is the fact that most people simply don't know how to network effectively. And that's not a bad thing in the sense that, you know, if you don't know how to do something, you don't know how to do it. But not knowing how to do it is kind of what causes these results. You know, if you do something and it's a negative experience, you know, you don't want to do it again. The fact of the matter is, as I said a few minutes ago, the competencies, the skills, behaviors can be learned, and you can make networking something that really works for you. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about, Patricia, if you can, I got to use this here. There we go. So there's the poll. The other thing that Patricia asked in one of the communications was, what was your biggest challenge in networking? There were about 60 responses, and I was able to look through those and pretty much saw a common theme. At least these 5 themes came through in those responses. So again, inexperienced, simply don't know how to do it. I'm an introvert and therefore it's challenging for me, or I'm an introvert and therefore I really can't network, which is not true. That's one of the myths of networking. Finding the time, following up, finding the time, and how do I follow up? And of course, networking virtually. All of these are the same things that I have seen, honest to God, for the last 15 years, other than networking virtually. That's fairly new. But these are the same things that people have been saying for a long time. And what I'm so passionate about when it comes to Context Count is I know these people can change and people can, you know, become experienced. Introverts can network. They just have to do it in the way that works for them. And as Anthony pointed out, finding the time, all of you have conversations every day with lots of people, and every one of those, not everyone, but recognizing the conversations that lend themselves to some form of networking and taking that opportunity makes it a natural part of what you do every day. So with that, let me move forward here and start with a quote from Adam Grant from his book, Give and Take. And I'll let you read the first part of the quote. So that fourth ingredient, the one that's critical, but often neglected, success depends heavily on how we approach our interactions with other people. One of the questions I'd like you to think about during the webinar and then after the webinar is, how do you approach your interactions with other people? After Adam published this book, Michael Simmons wrote an in-depth article for Forbes magazine, and he researched everything there was to ever research on networking, including multiple peer-reviewed studies that proved that the #1 predictor of career success is an open network. So if you're interested in your career success, one of the things you should do is really work hard to get an open network, because it's going to result in, actually, and the data showed this, a greater number of promotions, higher levels of compensation, more industry recognition. So there's plenty of reasons for us to think about why networking is so important to our success, our careers, and to the others who we're networking with. So here are the 8 competencies. I'm going to run through them very quickly and give you just a quick overview. And then we're going to, like I said, talk a little bit about the first 2 as a refresher, and then go into the third and fourth competencies. The first competency, adopt a positive network or identity. That's basically what you're thinking about when you answer the questions of the poll. And we all have a network or identity, whatever it is. This competency is based on a really simple principle that networking is not about talking and taking. Networking is about teaching and giving. And if you can just get that into your mind, that when you have a conversation, you should be thinking about, is this a conversation where there's an opportunity for me to teach myself something about another person, this other person I'm talking to? And is there an opportunity for me to learn something about them that would help me give back to them or help them in some way? The logic is really simple. The more I teach Patricia about who I am, what I'm all about, and again, it's not just communicating your expertise, it's communicating everything about you. What are my problems? What are my aspirations? What are my challenges? The more I teach Patricia, the greater likelihood she might be able to help me or give back in some way. Conversely, the more I learn all the same things about her, the greater likelihood I can help her or give back to her in some way. Taking a strategic approach is really about return on investment. We all spend time and effort and sometimes money to go to a networking event, and a SHRM conference, a SHRM chapter meeting. Sometimes there's a fee. Making sure that that investment in time, effort, and money is giving you the biggest return possible. And you're not wasting your time. You're not wasting none of us want to waste time in today's world. Developing trust-based relationships is the competency that really looks at each and every conversation you're having every day with whoever you're having it with. Lots of conversations are transactional. They come and go. But there are conversations throughout your day that may in fact lend themselves to a conversation that begins to teach and give, or teach and communicate your expertise and start to learn about the other person. Won't necessarily be able to give in that very first conversation, although there are examples where you can, but it's over time, it's over a number of conversations where you begin to build the trust that leads to a really mutually beneficial relationship. Networking gracefully is all about the rituals, the etiquette involved in networking. One of the rituals, of course, is the name exchange when we first meet somebody. The fact of the matter is, most of us aren't very good at remembering names, and that's because we don't spend enough time trying to teach and learn the other person's name. So you can do that. There's a skill and behavior that we can teach people that it's not 100% foolproof, but you'll be better able to remember names doing a few of the things that we teach people when it comes to that part of the networking conversation. Envisioning your ideal network is recognizing that you have 4 distinct networks in your world and making sure you're leveraging, maximizing, optimizing the value in each one of those networks. And then last but not least, achieve more and give more is kind of the culmination of, if you've really honed the skills and behaviors of these competencies, you begin to achieve more, you begin to learn more, you begin to advance your career, you build a reputation, a personal brand that is a very positive one. And at the same time, you're giving more. You're giving more to everyone that you interact with, people in your network, teammates that you work with, clients if you're a consultant, adding more value to the individuals that you meet each and every day and people that you have relationships with. So that's a quick overview of the 8 competencies. And in the first session, we again talked about a positive network or identity, which again was your answer on the poll, and I've just talked about. It's just critical to think about networking as teaching and giving, and communicating your expertise, being aware of the opportunities to teach others about yourself. First opportunity is the very first time you meet someone, the most common question asked is, what do you do? this is actually your first opportunity to teach someone about who you are, what you're all about. In almost all cases, people answer that question in a way that doesn't move the needle at all in teaching them anything about you. Common answers: VP of HR, I work for Amazon, I'm an attorney, I'm a registered nurse, I'm a CPA, I work in cybersecurity. People answer that question with their title, their profession, their industry. And when you tell me you're the VP of HR, that lumps you in with every other VP of HR in the world, in my mind. Okay, you're a VP of HR. It doesn't tell me what you do. And so there's a very simple technique that we try to get people to learn and use and get comfortable with, which Anthony referred to. And it's a two-sentence response. So again, any volunteers from that first session that want to share what we call the best test response with the audience? No brave souls? Okay, all right. Well, then I'll give you a simple example. So the typical answer to what do you do is, hi, I'm Vern. I'm the president and CEO of Contacts Count. Okay, that could be a typical response. What we try to drill into people's heads is, again, that's an opportunity to teach. And so there's a simple concept, two sentences. The first sentence is something you're best at, something you're an expert at, something you're really passionate about, something that you love to do. The second sentence is a testimonial to how you do that and an example of how you do it well. So rather than say I'm the president and CEO of Contacts Count, my answer to that question is I teach people the skills and behaviors to help them build trust-based, mutually beneficial relationships. I just finished a program with the MBA students at George Washington School of Business, where they said the program changed their lives. So that took, 15, 20 seconds maybe to say that. And as Anthony pointed out, a really good best test answer, the other person they ask another question. Besides, they say, what do you do? You answer that. And they say, change their lives. Tell me how did it change their lives? And now I'm teaching the other person a little bit more about, what I did or how I did it, and so they invite me to teach them more based on that, on a response like that. Now, it won't happen all the time, but it happens a lot when you have a really good best test answer. After the what do you do question, you won't get that question, a second time. Patricia and I met last week. We exchanged what do you do. So I see Patricia this week. I don't say, what do you do, Patricia? Unless I really forgot. Then it's not someone, what do you do? Patricia, remind me what you do. I forgot. Be honest, right? The types of questions you'll get will be, Patricia, what's new? What's going on in your life? How have you been? Those types of responses, all of which, again, are opportunities to share a short story, some recent experience, project you're working on at work, the new team that you just created, whatever it is, you can share it. It can be even something personal. You may have started the college application process with your teenage daughter or son, which, if any of you have been through that, you know what that's like. That's a project unto itself. But every time you share something about yourself, the possibility exists that the other person might respond with, geez, I just went through that application process with my son or daughter and my son, a couple of years ago. Let me tell you what I learned. And the only reason they're telling you that is because you shared something about yourself. And that's an example of how the power of human connection begins. And then it can, the deeper the relationship, the more involved the relationship becomes, the more you're able to give and share back with one another and help one another. So let me stop there since I've been talking. Questions, comments, thoughts? Everybody must be getting ready to go on vacation next week.
So open network phrase is new.
Okay.
Ellie, she said that's an open, and Adrian appreciated the example. I think that I would say from an HR perspective, I think for a lot of us, as you saw in the poll, it's an area where we don't spend a lot of our time focused on. And I know you and I have talked about this, Vern, simply because we're so busy taking care of everyone else. And how do we continue our development in this area, and what else should we be doing? So that's why I think these examples are great. And it's a great way to help us be better in an area where we don't focus as much on, because we're so busy focusing on everything else that needs to be done and taking care of everyone else.
Yeah. I would assume that each of you in your respective organizations try to learn as much as you can about the different functional areas, the managers, the directors, the vice presidents. What are their goals? What are their objectives? How does HR support them? What could HR do better? All of those questions you're asking them is you're trying to learn from them, about now it's inside the organization. You're trying to learn about what they do and what their issues are, what their problems are, what their opportunities are, and where does HR potentially support their efforts. So, in a sense, you're doing one half of the networking. You're trying to learn as much as you can about them, but you're not, teaching them more about what you do, and I know, having been in HR, sometimes it's teaching them about what you can do and what you can't do. That's illegal. We can't do that. Okay. But the more that you can teach others about yourself, the greater likelihood they might be able to help you. So I agree 100% with what Patricia just said. So, all right. Well, again, continue. If you've got other questions, let Patricia know. So let's move on to the third competency, which is engaging others. This is the communicate your expertise is the teaching competency. Engaging others is the competency where you're trying to learn as much as you can about the other person. If I ask you to think about an iceberg, what word or phrase, put it in the chat, what's the first image, or what's the first thing you think about when you think about the word iceberg?
So I was seeing Titanic, glacier,
Yeah.
cold,
Okay.
melting, so much more below the surface.
Okay. Yeah, the so much more below the surface is the kind of the perfect analogy for the beginning of a relationship. So in the very first few conversations that you're having with someone, you can be teaching, they can be learning, but most of that is probably above the waterline. It's the part of the iceberg that you can see. You're seeing it immediately. You're learning something about who they are, where they grew up, what do they do, what's their job, maybe something about their personal life, their family. You're learning those things, but you all know that any person has a lot more to share. There's a lot more about this person that I'm meeting for the first time than what I'm experiencing right now. And in order to get below the waterline, in order to get a much more deeper relationship with the person, you've got to have more and more conversations. So, and in order to do that, in order to learn more, you've got to ask good questions. You all pretty much know what an open-ended question is. as opposed to a closed-ended question. An open-ended question gets somebody to share more about a deeper answer. There's more to the answer to the question than, where did you go on vacation? That's a one-word answer. That doesn't tell you much about, they like the vacation, what was their experiences, what did they learn? I mean, there's so many other questions you could ask about the vacation. So we talk about at Context Count asking stop and think questions, questions where there's, adding, some emotion in terms of the way you ask the question, seeking an opinion, kicking it around. So should I try to get a couple more volunteers here? Somebody who, will answer. I'll ask the question, you answer.
Well, before we do that, Vern, I have a
Sure,
quick
Anthony.
question for you, Tony, again. So this is where I think, like once the conversation starts, I at least feel like kind of comfortable to ask maybe deeper questions. Where I pause in networking or maybe get a little bit shy, introversion coming into play, is the approach. Like, so approaching that new person, like what's a way, especially when there's like small groups, or let's say it's just a big room full of people. Like, if you could walk through a 30-second scenario of how you would approach someone,
Okay.
that would be great.
Okay. Let me back up a little bit, Anthony, and make another point about the situation you just described. If you're going to a networking event, why are you going there? And that ought to be clear in your head, in everybody's head. I mean, to go to a networking event, just to go to a networking event, it may turn out, it could turn out great, but a lot of times the percentages would show, that was a waste of time, or I didn't, I hardly met anybody. I didn't meet anybody that I was interested in. And so now we're actually talking about the fourth competency, strategic approach. Okay. If I'm going to this networking event, why am I going? Can I look up who's going to be there? Can I see their titles? Is there someone I really want to talk to? And if you do that, if you see there's just really someone you want to talk to because they're in the same industry, they have the same title, then it almost makes it easier. You seek out that person and say, hey, I saw that you're, in charge of recruiting for XYZ company. I'm in charge of recruiting. What's going on in the recruiting world for you, right now? You've already thought about the questions as opposed to trying to, come up with them on the fly. But if I'm going to a networking event and I've done that homework, and I've prepared some questions, it's so much easier. If let's suppose somebody invited me to a networking event and I said, okay, I'll come to your networking event. And I really didn't do any planning. I mean, I just simply say, hi, I'm Vern. I'm Vern Schellinger. My last name is like Challenger, only it's Schellinger. So I'm trying to teach them my name in my introduction very quickly. And, I'll probably say, they'll introduce themselves and I'll say, what do you do? And they'll say, well, some people will give you a great answer to what do you do. And then based on their answer, you can ask a follow-up question. Some people will say, I'm the VP of HR. And then I'll say, that's interesting. What's the biggest challenge you're having in HR today? So it's really thinking about the types of questions that you can ask and having them kind of, in your library, in your head. And there's so many, what I think of, these are not difficult questions. What's your biggest challenge with HR? What, you can ask them, well, what are the, how big is the company? What's your revenue? You can ask them questions about the business. What challenges they have on? Who are their biggest competitors? You can ask a lot of questions. Now, some of those are, again, closed-ended questions. They'll give you a short answer. If anybody is in business, what's your product? What are you selling? Why would somebody buy it from you? What's your customer base? What are your challenges going forward? Those are some basic questions that as you ask people, in most cases, they'll start to open up. And I think you've heard the phrase now, once people start to talk, they don't mind talking about themselves. Did that help, Anthony?
Yeah, I like that homework piece ahead of time, and maybe to identify like 3 to 5 people I would like to connect with based on what I do, but also just if they have an area that I'm looking to grow in.
Yeah, yeah. And again, the other thing that I think that's important for everyone to realize, we have lots of conversations with lots of people every day, and when we have a networking conversation, whether that's with somebody in the organization at work, or whether it's in a networking event, or whether it's, you're introduced to somebody by somebody in your network, not every single networking conversation is going to turn into, this person's my lifelong friend. It's just not going to happen. So don't think you've failed if it, either party can say, well, this is just not somebody that I'm that interested in to learn more about or want to be, involved with more. And you'll make those same evaluations yourself about other people, and it's okay. So as long as let's suppose you meet, 10 people, and 2 or 3 of them you really connect with, and it really does become a trust-based, mutually beneficial relationship. That's gold. That's, as you help one another, throughout your career in whatever it is. And sometimes it's help in your personal lives. And so if you continue to network and you build, this year you create 2 or 3 great relationships, and the next year it's 2 or 3 more great relationships, you'll find over the course of, 3 or 4 or 5 years, you've got somebody said open network it simply means a broad, diverse, open network of people, within your industry, outside your industry, people who are diverse in the way they think, diverse in the way they're, who they are as people.
So Vern, there's some comments in the chat, and one
Yeah.
of the questions was, like, you have a great introduction about who you are, but what if it doesn't engage people? How do you pivot? I usually default by asking about them.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would say. In other words, if you give your best test answer, you think it's a great answer, it's worked 100 times before in the past, but for this particular person, you get no, okay, that's nice, that's nice. Then yeah, I would pivot and say, okay, tell me a little bit about yourself, because you do have to be conscious. We talk about teaching and giving. You've got to be, so for instance, if Patricia asked me, what do I do? And I tell her, and then she asked me a follow-up question, and I'm telling her more and more about what I'm doing. Then she asked me another follow-up question. You've got there's a little person in my head that says, okay, Vern, enough about you. This is about teaching and giving. And all I'm doing is teaching Patricia. I need to start learning about her. My phrase is, okay, enough about me, Patricia. Let me learn a little bit about you. Tell me what you do and what you're involved in. And so you try to balance that in the conversation. And there are some people who, you have a great what you do question, and there's no response. And there are some people, while I am really proud of how many people we've been able to, improve their networking skills, there are people in the world who just will never be good at networking because of who they are and their personality and so forth and so on. I think that's a pretty small percentage of people, because again, we've worked with, you name it, and we've worked with, whether it's an industry or profession, we've worked with lots of different people, and all of them have been able to improve their networking skills. So but that's a good question. And that will happen. So don't let it throw you. Just move on. When you run up into a situation where it just doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. Thanks, Patricia. It's been great talking to you. There's a few other people here I really need to connect with, and thanks so much for the great conversation. And exit.
Another comment was that they're very comfortable building the connection, getting into the conversation. The steps to convert to a sale are my challenge, which I would assume as well, the steps for a lot of us to convert to potentially building that connection to help us in the future, or for whatever it might be. How do you kind of take it to that next level?
Yeah, so again, one of the challenges that people wrote about was follow-up. This is where, if you adopt the teaching and giving part of it, you know, and you're asking questions and you're learning more and more about the other person, the greater likelihood follow-up becomes easier. So even in the first conversation, so if somebody asks me a question about XYZ and I know something about that, in the very first conversation, I can say, well, let me tell you about the leadership program I developed at the American Bankers Association. Okay, I've got a lot of experience there. I can, if that's what they're talking about, I can actually give back to them right in the moment. If I don't know anything about the topic, Patricia, let me introduce you to Jeff. Jeff is an executive coach I've known for a long time. And if you're looking for somebody to help you with executive coaching, Jeff is somebody, you know, I can introduce you to him. So I can give, you know, the give can still be immediate. It just may be with a different person at some point in time. The third thing I can do is that I might be able to do is, Patricia, I don't know much about that, but I just saw this article on XYZ. Would you like me to send it to you? Those are three things you can do in the moment, possibly in the moment. There's other times in the conversation where you won't be able to think of a give whatsoever. And that's okay. Don't put pressure on yourself to feel like you got to give in that first or second conversation. The more you get to know the person, the easier it becomes, because you share more and more information. You teach, and you're teaching each other about yourself, and things will come up, and then it will click for you. Oh, I can help you in this area. I can do that. I can give you I can give back at this point. So it's really just having, again, that mindset of teaching and giving, and that's where, like I said, the follow-up becomes easier, because either you need to, you know, after the meeting, you know, make yourself some notes, you know, to remind yourself. If you've got a really good memory, maybe you're just going to be able to remember it, or it's going to click. You're going to see this article and you say, oh, that's what I talked to Patricia about 2 weeks ago. Let me send it to her. Hopefully that helps. Anything else, Patricia?
No, nothing additional.
Okay. So if I said to Patricia, you know, here's an example, seek an opinion. Patricia, I'm thinking about moving our paid time off policy to unlimited, you know, as much paid time off as you want. What do you think about that? Now, she didn't have to give me an answer now, but there's a simple example that within the HR community, you could ask for opinions from any one of your HR colleagues. And I literally did that all of the time. As soon as a new piece of legislation came out, or as soon as some new program came out, or something happened, I simply pick up the phone and, you know, reach out to 5 or 6 of the HR people that I knew the best, and who I respected and I knew were really on top of things, and got their input. You know, kick it around is just, you know, what do you think about XYZ? And, you know, and you can have a conversation around that. So these are all kind of question, you know, seeking opinion, kicking around, adding emotion, getting somebody to think about their answer, and again, make it a richer response than just, you know, 1 or 2 word answer. And on this next slide, here are a bunch of stop and think questions. And I'm not going to go through these in the webinar. You're going to get a copy of the slides. Be aware that this is not an all-inclusive list by any means. You might have your own favorite, you know, stop and think type of question that you ask people. And as you're doing that, and as you're learning about other people, what you want to be thinking about is, above the line in the middle there, it says, what can you give? And you should be prepared. You know what you're good at, you know what you have knowledge about, you know what you're interested in. So if any of those things come up in a conversation, you know automatically, these are the types of things I can give back to people. If you're in the conversation and they bring up something that you don't know anything about, make a mental note, make some kind of note that here's something that this person wants to get, and maybe down the road I meet somebody who's an expert in that field and can help them. So let's see. Let me give you a quick, simple, real life example that's happened in probably the last 6 months. I was working with a client, was in the job search, was really struggling to figure out what she wanted to do, helped her with networking. And the more she talked to people, the more clarity she got about where she wanted to go in her career. She then decided that she wanted to be an executive function coach. She actually had experience in that. And an executive function coach is a coach that works in a really specialized area with neurodiverse individuals, people with autism and issues like that, where when it says executive function, it really means the executive function of the brain that is wired differently than most of the population, and they need some special coaching, some specialized strategies to be successful in whatever job they have. So she's telling me this, and I'm saying, okay, that's interesting. I kind of don't know anything about executive function coaching. I'm learning it now as Holly's telling it to me. So I have a very close friend, Jeff Koppel, who, by the way, some of you may know Sharon Armstrong. Sharon introduced me. This is another benefit of networking. Sharon introduced me to Jeff 7 years ago. Jeff and I have had breakfast every 3 or 4 months for 7 years in a row, got to know each other really well. So I said to Jeff, Jeff, what do you know about executive function coaching? And he smiled and he said, I know a lot. I said, really? I said, you don't do executive function coaching. What? And he said to me, I just finished a 6-month coaching assignment with Ellie O'Flaherty. She's one of the world's most prominent executive function coaches. And I said, can we hook Ellie up with Holly? And sure enough, we did. Holly now she's new to this is where she's headed. She's just starting her business, and she's got an opportunity to talk to somebody who's been in the business, who's established. And Holly said, Elle couldn't have helped. She was just unbelievable that, how gracious she was in helping me learn technology, learn systems, learn different things about what I should be doing. So there's an example, a real life example of the power of human connection. Now, some people have said to me, oh, wow, boy, that was serendipity. That was just luck. But if I had enough time, I'd tell you 50 of those stories. So, and then you might say, well, that wasn't luck. That was, this stuff really works. And it does. So other questions? All right, well, let's move on. We've got enough time here to dive into taking a strategic approach. And on our networking competency assessment, this is the one competency, for some reason, that seems to get the lowest score in a lot of cases. And the only thing I can think of is people, when they think about networking, strategic approach, what's that got to do with networking? But it goes back to what I was sharing with Anthony before, Tony, think about it, plan your approach to networking. What are your goals? What are your objectives in networking? Who do you want to meet? Why would you want to meet them? Once you think about the goals and objectives, okay, if this is what I want to do, who in my network, who in my current network might be able to help me here? And let me reach out to them, have coffee with them, have lunch, Zoom meeting, however you connect, and talk about, this is a goal and thought you might be able to give me some insight to it. If there are people that you believe could help you that are not in your network, can someone in your network introduce you to them? Because almost always when somebody in your network introduces you to someone else, they're more than likely to say, sure, I'm happy to talk to you. If that doesn't happen, where are these people? Where do you find them? What networking event might they go to that you could attend where you could introduce yourself to them? So it's simply planning and thinking about networking from that perspective. And, these are simple steps. What are your goals and objectives? Who can help you? Where are the people you need to connect to? Obviously, this is the time and effort. When will you meet with them? And again, create an agenda. If you're going to meet with them and you have a goal and an objective in terms of networking, let's say it's, you really want to advance your career. Who are the people in your HR network who are maybe more senior to you, who you have a decent relationship with, who would share with you their story about how they moved from, recruiter to director to VP. And those are the types of questions that you'd frame to have that meeting. Pretty straightforward. This isn't rocket science, but it's something I don't think people think about as much as they should. And I talked about the 4 networks that people have. One is your work network. That's the 7th competency. The people you work with day in and day out, the people in the HR department, maybe the people in finance and accounting because of benefits and payroll and all of that stuff. Maybe some outside consultants that you work with on a regular basis. Those people are involved in your work on a daily, monthly basis. If you're in an organization and the organization's, let's say, greater than 100 or 200 employees, the likelihood that all 200 employees is not very good. But you could meet all of those 200 employees pretty easily, ride up with them on the elevator, walk with them, from the parking lot, bump into them somewhere. You can start a conversation because you have this common bond that you work for the same organization. You have your professional network, and this is an example of this webinar. This is your professional network, other HR professionals. And then you have your family and friends, which is the network that's underutilized the most, believe it or not, surprisingly. I mentioned those are kind of the 4 networks. There is a 5th network that we call kind of your key network for this particular project or this particular challenge. So and so this kind of aligns with taking a strategic approach. When I decided to buy Contacts Count, I reached out to 15 or 20 people in my network, and I had 2 criteria. A, they had to know me well, and B, they had to know about my work that I had done with Contacts Count up to this point. Now, there are people in my network who know me well, but don't know much about Contacts Count. So, my questions to them were questions around, here's what I'm thinking of doing. What do you think? And of course, they realized, and I realized, at the end of the day, it was my decision whether I was going to buy the company or not. I knew that. But here's an example of one of the things that they said to me in one of those conversations. Vern, have you thought about X? And I said, oh my God, I didn't think about X. And without reaching out to that network and getting that kind of feedback, I would have never thought about X. And I could have stubbed my toe. It could have been a mistake. Again, that's just another example of the power of human connection and how having an open network with lots of people that you know well and they know you well, and you help each other all the time. So I'm doing way too much talking here. So let me stop. Questions, comments?
So there's a question, how do you engage the conversation when you may not be familiar with what the person's doing, i.e. they're in research science and I'm in HR?
Okay. So I don't know anything about, I know very little about research science. Can you explain some of the key concepts to me like I'm a 10-year-old? And I would almost bet whether it's research science or whether it's analytics or whether it's computer programming, people are happy to tell you about what they do. And again, you won't learn it in any depth, but you're showing interest in who they are and what they do. And all of us, if somebody's showing interest in what we do and wants to learn a little bit of something about what we do, we are happy as human beings, more than likely to tell them, that. So just be honest and upfront that, that's a fascinating field and I'd like to learn more about it. And so, what would be the 3 or 4 things that would help me, what could you tell me that could learn about it? Is there a book that's written for like a 3rd grader that I can read on this topic? And as I said, they're again, it's not, I've said this before, 100% of the people you work with, you meet, they're all not going to become, your best networking buddies. Some of them, because of their personality, at one end of the spectrum, the research science would say, well, if you don't know much about it, you probably, you're probably not going to learn too much about it from me. Well, okay. Been nice talking to you. Move on. So.
She said, thank you. That's very helpful. And another participant was saying how she was saying that as a recruiter, they pretty much do the exact same thing. Treat me like I'm an X grader and tell me how you go, tell me what it is you're doing and how you do that. How does this work? How does networking work now in an environment where there is a lot more that's virtual? We've certainly gone back to a lot more in person, but how does virtual play a part in it?
So when the pandemic first started, the Georgetown University Alumni Association reached out to me. I've done a lot of work with Georgetown. And I said, Vern, we need you to write a blog, do a video interview on what do we need to do different now that we're in a virtual world. And I said, Sarah, my short answer is nothing. You don't really need to do anything differently. There are certainly differences. If we are face-to-face, we're having a 3-dimensional experience. And so that is different than the 2-dimensional experience that all of us are experiencing right now. And so the neuroscience has been pretty clear that, there is this thing, Zoom fatigue. And part of the reason for Zoom fatigue is that in a 3-dimensional face-to-face conversation, our brains kind of pick up on the little social cues automatically, and they don't use any energy to do that. It's just kind of automatic. When we're in a 2-dimensional conversation like this, our brains actually have to work harder to pick up the social cues. So it's not the same. It's easier to, in a face-to-face conversation, look away, clear your brain a little bit in between. It's just harder to do. That said, so here's another personal story. 2 years ago, I met a leadership coach here in Southwest Florida, Erin Ellis. She was introduced by someone else she and I both knew. And Erin Ellis and I have been trying to have a face-to-face meeting for 2 years, and it hasn't happened, either because of her schedule or my schedule. Erin and I had a conversation 2 or 3 months ago, and she was talking about a leadership development program that she was involved in, and I was asking her questions about it. Tell me more, tell me more. She said, Vern, it's just basically conversational intelligence. And I said, well, have you read the book? She said, read the book? What book? I said, there's a book on conversational intelligence, which she wasn't aware of. I shared with her as much as I could via PowerPoint and different things that I had on conversational intelligence. She used it in the leadership development program. She had added so much to the program, I couldn't believe it. She introduced me to the director of learning and development at Neogenomics, which is a biotech firm here in Florida. And I now have a contract with them to do a contacts count program. So those are examples where we've each given to each other in big ways, and we've never met. We've never met face to face. So it can be done. I don't do anything differently in a Zoom call or anything like this, or a phone call. It's the same. It's teaching and giving. It's the same approach. It's the same type of questions. All of the other competencies pretty much work the same. I still, in fact, this biotech firm said, we want you to be here live at the office. I said, really? I was so excited. Let's do a live presentation. So, because they're there, if you're in learning and development, it is so much easier if I'm presenting to see somebody who's got a quizzical look on their face. Patricia, do you have a question? I can pick up on those cues so much easier in a face-to-face than I can, in this type of situation. Hopefully that helps. Yeah, virtual is not going away. We're going to live with it. So use these same skills and behaviors, and you'll find that. I mean, Patricia and I haven't met, and we've developed a pretty good relationship in the 2 or 3 months that we've been communicating.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vern. We have just a few minutes left. Did you have anything additional
Did I have anything additional
that you wanted to share? Maybe your contact information?
I'll share here in the 2 minutes. Here's a quote from a guy named Albert Einstein. Learning is an experience. Everything else is just information, which I love, because everything that I've just given you in the last 60 minutes is information, and that's all I've done. It's giving you information. So if you really do want to, improve your networking skills, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Whenever you learn something new, you've really got to have the motivation to learn it. You've got to try it. You're going to fail. You're going to make mistakes. Even something as simple as the best test, answer that Anthony talked about, and I shared mine with you. That took a while to get down where I could say that, as comfortably as I say my name. It's a really different way of introducing yourself. So there's lots of skills and behaviors in contacts count. So it's learning all of these little different skills and behaviors. I'm sorry. Let me go back up here. Probably don't have time to share this, but I would encourage you, as soon as this is over, just to write down one thing that you learned, one thing that you think you could commit to doing differently in your conversations with others. And obviously, if you want to reach out to me, I'd be happy to talk to you, chat with you. I'd love to hear stories about, your networking experiences. So that's the email. If you'd like to learn more about Contacts Count, there's the website. There's a 5-minute networking assessment. It's a little bit deeper than the one word or one poll that we did today. And I know Patricia had talked about in a communication to all of you about buying the book Strategic Connections. And I did not realize at the time, but it is out of print right now. So I'm talking to the publisher. So now there is another book that was written before Strategic Connections called Make Your Contacts Count, which is a great primer. There's a lot of, now it's a little dated, but there's still a lot of really solid information in that. And again, I'm happy to chat with any of you over time. Be aware that if you reach out to me in like a week from now, you'll get my out of office, because for the month of August, I will be celebrating my 50th wedding anniversary with my lovely wife, and we'll be in Europe for that amount of time. So With that, thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. Always enjoyed talking to other HR professionals.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you again, Vern. Everybody have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much.